Good evening, Zoom audience. We have not yet begun.
Hey, we're Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Denise Ward. I'm with the Friends of the Aptos Library. And you are here because this is our Farm to Table event. It is one of 11 events that are being put on as part of the Our Community Reads program. So I know some of you have heard about this event from various ways, and you may not know about Our Community Reads, but we're in our 6th year. And every year we choose a book. Actually, you'll all be invited to next year's voting reception. And we present a short list of 4 or 5 books. And from those books, you all get to vote. And that book is what we then create events around. And so this year's book was Mary Coyne. And if you haven't read it, it's really fabulous. It's written by Marissa Silver. So I want to first say thank you to Temple Beth for hosting us, and to our tech people, Rowan and Sarah from the library. And just also to let you know that we have a couple of events coming up. We have one on Sunday, which is being put on by the La Selva Beach Friends. Anyway, we have calendars back there. We have one on Tuesday, which is a documentary about Dolores Huerta. And that's at the MAW downtown. So we're kind of excited. It seems kind of big time to have an event there. And then we have our reminiscence talk on the 28th at the Rio Sands. So we hope that we see you at some of those upcoming ones. Thank you to Carolyn Rudolph, owner of Charlie Hong Kong, for providing some food that you can nibble on before you leave tonight. So I'm just going to introduce our moderator, Dr. Alicia Bencomo Garcia. She joined Cabrillo College in 2022 as a faculty member in ethnic studies. She's originally from the California Central Valley and was a first-generation high school graduate. Farm work played a major role in her upbringing, as her father worked and continues to work as a farm worker in Fresno County. So thank you so much, Alicia.
Thank you so much, Denise. I am very excited to be here with you all tonight, especially in presence of our wonderful 3 moderators. And so we will go ahead and get started, panelists. So we are going to go ahead and get started with having our 3 panelists introduce themselves, and then we will dive into some questions and take questions from you all at the end as well. So we'll get started with Peter.
Well, I have to say before I go any farther that many years ago, as a student at San Francisco State University, it's called now, was college then, I went on strike for about 5 months with thousands of other students to get the first ethnic studies curriculum in the country approved. And it's been a struggle maintaining it from everything I know. But I just want you to know that you're carrying out a really proud legacy, and I'm grateful to you for doing it. So my name is Peter Shapiro, and I make no pretense of being an expert on farm labor. I'm here, I think, because somebody got wind of a book I'd written about the Watsonville Canning Strike, which took place in 1985 through 87. It was an 18-month strike. And it did have a bearing. I think the whole farm labor issue did have a bearing on it. It certainly touches on it. But, you know, to me, it was just, the strike was a tremendous inspiration to me. I was working at the Oakland post office then as a mail handler, and we just brought in a bunch of, quote, Hispanic, Spanish surname people as a result of an affirmative action agreement. And I and some friends, we did a food drive for the Watsonville strike because we raised 5,000 pounds of food for them and sent them down to help the strike out. And the people who'd come in at that affirmative action thing, they didn't need to be told what it was about. They responded immediately. The strikers were overwhelmingly, you know, Mexicana women. I suspect about 30 or 40% of them were undocumented, although that never became an issue during the strike. Their union was virtually moribund when the strike started, but they were able to not only hold out for 18 months and defeat the employer's attempt to decertify the union, but they forced the owner of the plant into foreclosure. Then they, when the plant was brought out by a local grower named David Gill, who I understand Dick knows, he bought the plant. They basically had a wildcat strike without the support of the Teamsters Union, which finally won a contract that they could approve of. And it was a tremendously inspiring story, and I wanted to write about it, and I did. And I hope that it has some bearing on what we'll be talking about tonight, because I think the message I took from that is not only the whole notion of like labor solidarity and, you know, what workers are capable of, but also this became very much a strike for, you know, about the rights of Latino and Latina people, which were not recognized in Watsonville at all. They were pretty much shut out of any kind of meaningful role in the union before the strike, and by the time it was over, they'd pretty much taken it over. And that was every bit as important, I think, as the, you know, the union contracts issues. So I'll leave it at that.
Hi, I'm Dick Peixoto. I'm the owner of Lakeside Organic Gardens in Watsonville. And my came talk a little bit, not a professional talker or anything, so do the best I can. But I came to talk about farm workers tonight, and I can talk from experience. I started as a farm worker when I was 12 years old, picking blackberries, and then went on to pick Driscoll strawberries when I was 13, and picked there for a couple of years. Went to work in a grocery store for a couple of years. Decided I didn't like working there, and actually started farming when I was on my own when I was 17. Bought my first tractor when I was 16, and actually bought a tractor before I bought a car to drive. So, and started farming when I was a senior in high school, before and after school, and did pretty much all the work myself. Moved all the pipe, drove the tractor, did everything until harvest time, and then found out that I couldn't keep up with the harvest. I had to have some guys come help me on the harvest, and I grew broccoli and lettuce and green beans and squash, and that was all conventional back in those days. And it's kind of interesting because my dad was a pesticide salesman for a living. That's what he did for a living. So I was kind of taught that, you know, you see a bug, you spray. If you don't see a bug, you better spray because it might be coming. And so took me a while to get off of that. So about 20 years I farmed conventionally, and then started Lakeside Organics back in 1996, and converted all of my land to organic, and kind of grew that up over the years to where we have about 2,000 acres of organic in the Power Valley now that we farm organically. Most of that we've transitioned ourselves over the 3-year transition to make it organic. And then we've also got 1,000 acres that we do down in the Imperial Valley in Southern California, and about 250 acres we do in Mexico now. And so we do about 50 different crops. We have 56 ranches in Watsonville on different parcels, and we have 13 in Southern California and 4 over in Mexico. about 300 employees. We offer year-round employment for all the employees. Slows down in the wintertime, they can go south and work down south. We have a policy, we really don't lay them off. We keep them employed all year long. A lot of them can't collect unemployment, so they rely on us to keep them afloat all year long. And so, you know, we've built our program around them, and they built their lives around us, and it works out really well. So you can talk a little bit more about that tonight, but I'm you know, just really happy to be here, and I can talk a little more as the night goes on.
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here with you this evening. I'm Dr. Ann López, and I'm the director of Center for Farmworker Families. I got into my interest with farm workers by studying the impact of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, on the farms in Mexico. And this was in the late 90s. And without getting into a lot of detail, what I found was a binational population of farm workers and farmers in Mexico who were in inordinate pain and suffering as a result of this treaty. And it's still going on today, unfortunately. So when they were run off their land, essentially by NAFTA in Mexico, and came here, I started meeting more and more farm workers. And when I finished my dissertation, I recall sitting at the computer thinking, you know, I need to do something about this. And that gave rise to the Center for Farmworker Families, because I realized there was very little publicity about how these people, these farmers, were run off their land in Mexico and the struggles they were having trying to establish themselves here. So the Center for Farmworker Families, one of our key goals is to inform the public about the difficult life circumstances of farm workers. Most people almost consider them invisible. When I started my research in '97, there was literally nothing anywhere about farm workers in any publication or anything. And I'm happy to say that today you find articles about farm workers almost everywhere. So I think there is awareness growing. I found that farm workers within the Oaxacan community in the winter actually were starving. I think we probably would have had deaths of children had I not stopped by and visited some families. And luckily, the food bank came through, the Second Harvest Food Bank. And the afternoon I called, they brought out food for 144 families. And since then, we've been doing distributions of food, household goods, clothing. We've had 3 COVID clinics, a flu clinic. We have chiropractic services. We've got an acupuncturist, a masseuse, and we provide all kinds of baby items, diapers. Diapers are probably the most requested item. So we do that once a month. We have a class called Bridging the Digital Divide, in which we teach farm workers how to use a computer. And then we give them the computer that they use during the class to take home to keep. And also we give them a phone number for free internet and Wi-Fi. So we do that. And then I introduce groups to farm workers so they can hear the stories I've been hearing by hosting farm worker reality tours. So we take groups of people to actually meet the farm workers and hear the stories. And I think that probably that's one of the most impactful ways of the public becoming aware of the circumstances that farm workers are dealing with. So those are just some of the things that we do, but we try to do whatever we can to make their lives more meaningful and more comfortable. So thank you for listening.
Thank you all for introducing yourself. So the first question we have tonight reads as follows. It's question number 1. The conditions under which Mary Coyne worked were abominable. Where do we stand today? Have issues and working conditions improved for farm workers in the past few decades? And we'll start with Dick.
I can talk from my experience. So obviously, if you read the book there was some real problems back then. And I can honestly tell you, when I got into farming back in the mid-70s, there was so many farm workers around. There was excess farm workers. It was easy to you could just fire somebody for any reason. You could hire somebody for any reason. There was tons of farm workers. So every morning you would go out, you would have, if you need a crew of 10 people, there would be 30 people waiting at the end of the field. You would pick out the best, and if they didn't do the job, you could just fire them and bring them more guys in. And it was really back then there was really a lack of respect for the farm workers. They were more I felt like at that time that people felt more like they were a commodity than actual people. And it was nothing that I supported in any way. I felt that from the get-go, like I say, I started working with these guys when when I was 12, 13 years old, and I had a lot of respect for what they did out there in the field. But a lot of farmers back then, it was just like, bring them in, use them, and when you're done, then, you move on. And because there was so many farm workers around back then, it was easy to do. And it was happening. And there was people living in caves, probably read stories. There was people that lived on the ranches, lived underneath willow trees and along the creeks and everything, and would just get up in the morning, come to work, and go back and live underneath the trees. So luckily, over the period of years, there's been less and less farm workers available. They've been in higher demand, and now there's a shortage of farm workers. And I think that a lot of farmers have learned that if you're going to have a steady workforce, you have to show respect for them, and you have to treat them more like partners than as opposed to, just outside people. So I know I've had some of my guys that have been with me for 25 years that have worked for, me 25 years, and you'll never see me drive through the field and keep the windows up, drive through the field and just drive by the guys. They'll tell you, if you go talk to my guy, you'll see I roll down the window. I may not have time to visit with them today, but I'll say, hey, how you guys doing today? ¿Cómo está? ¿Cómo está? And then, and they all give me a thumbs up, and hey, and, and a lot of times they're yelling, but they're not yelling at me. They're yelling with me to, hey, we're out here doing the job, getting the job done. And I say a lot of times I'm the guy that gets the credit. Oh, you're Lakeside Organics, you're the guy. And I says, you know what? I'm not the guy. I'm just the guy that steers the boat. But those are the guys with all the oars in the water that make it all happen. And if you don't have that type of respect for the employees, I don't think you're going to get anywhere. And I've seen more and more companies that come out and they said, they don't even want to associate with the workers, And like I say, because I've actually spent more time, probably more of my life with the workers than I have with my own family or with all the other people around me, I've really gained a respect. And I'd say just me, but almost any successful farmer today has learned that, you need to show respect, and respect is mutual respect for both ways. And, we take a lot of pride in, like, our employees now have insurance, and they have an option to step up their insurance to have better insurance if they want to. If they want to add their families, they can add their family to the insurance program. We have, like at our company, we have a farmer's market. We call it the employees farmer's market, where any of our employees can come in and get fresh produce. I learned years ago the poor cilantro guy would go home every night, take a bunch of cilantro home, and the wife would say, cilantro again? What am I gonna do with this? So I learned, and I said, we all put that in the cooler, and then every day the housewife or the employee can come there, take a bag of produce home so they can eat healthy at home. So I think goes beyond, I heard years ago, another farmer actually said this, but he said that, as a farmer, as a businessman, it's not all about profit, it's about creating wealth. And that's creating wealth with your employees, creating wealth with your vendors, creating wealth in your community. And I think that's where our goal is on a day-to-day. And I said, I have a saying in my company, you can ask my guys, and it says, everybody can win. We don't have to have winners and losers. Everybody can win. And I think that a lot of farmers nowadays they're still kind of responsible for things that happened in the past. But a lot of the younger farmers today now that are coming up understand how important it is to work with their people and work as a team to make it happen. And I preach that. And I say, I'd ask the salespeople who make the most money in my company, who's most important? And they all always say, oh, I guess me, because I make the most money. I said, no, the most important guy is the guy down there that picks the radishes or picks the cilantro, because he doesn't do it. Okay. Oh, back on. So if he doesn't do his job, you can be the best salesman in the world, but you can't sell garbage. So everybody along there, if that guy doesn't do his job and the truck driver doesn't show up to pick the produce up and the cooler guy doesn't cool the produce, the shipping guy doesn't ship it, then we get nowhere. We all crash and burn. And so I think it's just really important. And I preach it throughout my company. We're all equally important to make it all work. And I think that a lot of farmers nowadays understand that whole concept and understand that. And employee retention is a very important part of running any business. And in our company, I think we go above and beyond. I mean, every year we have a company picnic for all the employees at Gilroy Gardens over the hill, and we tell them bring their whole family. We got 600-700 people that we pay for to go over there so that they can have a day with their family. Most of the farmers never take their families to Gilroy Gardens because it's too expensive. But we put it on over there. We have a barbecue for them. They can spend the rest of the day with their families. It's one of their best days of the year. Guys have told me it's their best day of the year. We look forward to it every year to go over there and spend a great time with their family and their coworker. They work as a family. And I would say I have two families. I have a family at home, and I have my Lakeside family that we live with more than I could do with my family at home. So, and I think that's just really important that people understand that the sins of the past, we're leaving those behind, and we're all looking forward to working with our employees to make everybody's life better.
Thank you so much for that response, Dick. For our next question, and in your opinion and through your experiences, what steps must be taken to transform the farm working system?
Well, I have three in mind that would transform the lives of farm workers. And number one is comprehensive immigration reform. We must, yes. Yeah, we must do something about this onus of being an undocumented person and living in constant fear. And most of the farm workers in this state are undocumented. I've heard figures as high as 83% in Watsonville. They live in constant fear of deportation and having their families torn apart. And I don't think that anyone who's worked weeks, months, and years in backbreaking work in the field should be worried about deportation. They provide, they're the source of the food that feeds the country. Why are we doing this to them? And I really think we need, as a citizenry, to stand up to the federal government and say enough of this. We've got to create a more humane system. They're also the most exposed to pesticides. We need to transform farming from poisoned fields to organic regenerative. We've lost 2/3 of all the wild animals on this planet since 1970. This is completely unsustainable. I mean, if we think we're going to be the last animals to go. We're not thinking straight. So we need to transform the pesticide issue as well. Another thing that farm workers need is a living wage. They don't want handouts. They don't want to be given food, et cetera. They want to earn enough money so that they can go to a store and buy their own food and support their own families. And I read recently that an average salary our wages can add up to $20,000 to $23,000 a year for a farm worker and their families. No one can live on that in this area. So they need a living wage. And then the last thing that's important is a contract with the employer. Excuse me. The UC Merced recently published a study of farm workers and found that roughly 22% of farm workers have their wages stolen. So in other words, you're a farm worker, you work for an employer, and then when you go to get paid, the employer says, go home or I'll deport you, whatever. And so this I think is completely unacceptable. Something needs to be done. And if they go to an attorney and try to get some kind of recourse for their lost wages, the attorney will ask for a contract. And of course, they aren't given contracts, so nothing happens. I have a family on the Farm Worker Reality Tour where all the members lost an entire season's wages because the grower didn't pay any of them. And this kind of abuse has got to stop. So those are my concerns. And I think that if we could take care of immigration, have them paid a reasonable wage or salary and have a contract with the employer, I think that would transform their lives overnight.
Thank you for that. Would anyone like to add anything to that?
Well, I'm really glad you brought up NAFTA. I thoroughly agree with you, and I thoroughly agree with what you said about immigration reform as well. I think we have to realize, first of all, that the problem with farm workers when they try to organize is that they were sort of the original precariat. Farm labor is generally, it's seasonal, it's temporary, and it's one of those jobs that's like where you don't have that kind of security of year-round employment. Most of the people that I wrote about in Song of the Stubborn 1000 who were working in the plant had at least some experience as farm workers. A lot of them had either been braceros themselves when the bracero program was still in effect, or they were the children or relatives of braceros, and they came to this country to basically be with their family members who were already here. And for them, it's like getting a work in a frozen food plant where you had a union contract, you had health benefits, you had something resembling a living wage. And because there was a huge labor shortage in the frozen food industry for quite a while, because the industry was expanding so rapidly that they couldn't keep up in terms of hiring people, you had a modicum of security that you simply did not have when you're working in the fields. And I think one of the reasons the strikers were so determined to hold out because they didn't want to go back to that situation where they were doing field work again. Too far? Better? Okay. I thought it was an ice cream cone, I think. So I think we have to realize, though, that more and more jobs in this country right now, first of all, are held by undocumented people, not just farm labor. And more jobs in this country are being treated as more and more working people are like part of what's currently fashionable to be referred to as a precariat. People who basically just move from job to job to job, never get a chance to settle down, never have a chance to get health insurance they can count on, or a pension or anything like that. That's the whole direction of business in this country is taking. And so it's a much larger problem. I also want to make the point that, we have a multinational working class in this country. We always have. There have always been many different nationalities. There have been waves of immigrants who have come over and have always gotten stuck with the crummiest jobs. That's still the case. Wage theft, it's happening in San Francisco, Chinatown right now. There was a huge settlement from a bunch of immigrant Chinese workers who worked in restaurants, who were being basically deprived of their pay as well. And it was a huge struggle for them to get redress of that. Just on a personal note, I argued for a while with a Trump supporter I knew who did not consider himself a racist, but he was, virulently anti-immigrant. They should have, get in line and wait their turn like everybody else. You've heard all the arguments. And I said, you know what? My father-in-law entered this country illegally in the worst years of the Great Depression. He was a paper son. And frankly, that was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. I hope I'm not embarrassing my wife by saying that in public, but it's true. I'm just grateful that he broke the law and came here illegally. And, he wound up, working at the Alameda Naval Air Station for years. He raised 3 kids. He served in the Army during World War II. I mean, what's the big deal? And yet he had to cheat to come here.
Thank you for sharing that. AB 2183 went into effect January 1st, 2023, which made many changes to California Agricultural Labor Relations Act. What does AB 2183 mean to you or to your work? And where would you like to start?
Well, I have sort of mixed feelings about 2183. I was in Sacramento when the march came or arrived, and it was an exciting time. I think that 2183 is really important in its principle of allowing workers to vote for unionization without retaliation from their employer. I think that's really important. The problem is that when the population you're dealing with is undocumented, when so many people are undocumented, a grower does not have to say very much to frighten people into not voting for unionization because, again, they live in this constant state of fear. So I think it's great. I'm all for them being, workers being able to vote and determine their own union status. But on the other hand, I think that given the context they're living in, I'm not sure that that can realistically happen until we have immigration reform. Once we get immigration reform and workers have more rights, then I think definitely they'll have more of a chance to vote for unionization without retaliation because they won't have the fear to deal with. So that's my take on it.
I think one of the things with the AB 2183, I think the interesting, I was going down to the desert a couple of years ago, and there was a, usually I see the paper machines, I don't pay any attention to the newspaper there. And I walked by one, I had to back up, and it said, the headline was, and it said, Cesar Chavez would be ashamed. And I thought it was kind of interesting. So I had to buy that paper, and it was a local paper. It wasn't the deal, but, and then I read the article, and what it basically said is that Cesar Chavez fought his whole life to give them the opportunity to have, secret ballots elections. And this one basically would take that right from the secret ballot elections and basically give the unions a chance to go to the people's houses and fill out cards. And there could be a lot of manipulation because these could be mailed in. Anybody could, fill out whatever they want. It could go either way, but it kind of going backwards from what we've been talking about nationally for the last couple of years as far as having accurate ballots. So when they step in the ballot booth and the ALRB is watching over those booths, I think that they have a pretty good chance once they go behind the curtain to cast their vote. But now that they're going to mail them in from home or fill out cards, and there's just be a lot more chance of, of fraud. And I think we're in a real danger zone with farm workers. And I think, and I can just talk from experience that, when back in the 70s, 80s, the union, the Cesar Chavez union was the United Farm Workers was 80,000 membership, and now they're under 6,000 membership. And the reason is that because they lost complete touch with the workers, and the workers don't support them. They can't win elections anymore. So they're down to from 150 companies down to 33. And a lot of those are smaller companies, and they lost complete touch with it. But now the union said we can't win elections, so this is our solution to the problem: is remove the secret ballot election so that we can have cards filled out. So as a grower, I'm pretty worried about it because I have no fear of my workers voting. In fact, I've had union people come on the place and say they want to talk to my workers. I say, go talk to them. I have no fear of the guys. Just go ask them. And the guy came back to me and said, hey, there's nothing here for us. We're leaving. See you later. So I don't really have fear, but unless things are manipulated, and then I do have fear, and that's my biggest fear. And to make the employees sign up for something they really don't want is scared to death of that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, first of all, in terms of mail ballots, I delivered them as a letter carrier up in Oregon for 15 years. And Oregon was the first state in the country to institute all mail ballots. And actually, we were very proud of the fact that we had some of the cleanest elections in the country. None of the crap that's come up recently, and since Trump came along, none of it was ever an issue up there. And I think it's a much easier way to make your opinion felt and to make your voice heard, to be able to do it in the privacy of your home and put it in the mail and mail it in and have a reliable, postal service deliver it. So I have to take exception to take on that one. But I also think that there's a lot more involved in the decline of the Farm Workers Union in the late 70s and 80s, and simply, being out of touch with the workers. There were definitely problems. In fact, it's become almost a cottage industry among some labor historians to try to figure out all the ways in which the UFW messed up. But frankly, you also have to consider the fact that in the Salinas Valley, where I think the organization was strongest, the Teamsters sent goon squads in there. They raided farm workers. They tried to take away their contracts. A lot of growers signed contracts, sweetheart contracts with the Teamsters. They wouldn't have to deal with the UFW. Jerry Brown, when he was governor, got the Agricultural Labor Relations Board set up, but then as soon as the Republicans took control of the State House, it was gutted. So, they had a lot to overcome. And I think clearly they made plenty of mistakes. It was a very difficult situation the union was in, but I don't think that their decline can be attributed simply to their being out of touch with the workers. It is very, very difficult to organize a transient temporary workforce, especially when you have to deal with things like, the whole problem with immigration, stuff like that, people being afraid of being deported and so forth. And I have some criticisms of the way the UFW handled that as well. They tended to be very suspicious of immigrant workers. That was one of their real weak spots, I think, even at their best. But the point is, there's a lot more involved here than just union leaders being out of touch with the rank and file. There really is. It's a really complicated and difficult business trying to organize farm workers. And I think anybody who tries to do it is worthy of respect, whatever mistakes they might make. And, there actually have been some successful, I'm sort of segueing into question 7 right now, if that's okay. There have been successful movements of farm workers, not just in California. Back in the Midwest, there was an organization called the Farm Labor Organizing Committee, which basically they won contracts for their members who worked in the tomato fields by organizing a nationwide boycott of Campbell's soup, which got enough support that Campbell's finally came to a kind of a 3-way agreement with the union and the growers. Most of the growers in that part of the country are small farmers, and Valdemar Velasquez, the head of FLOC, described them as a bunch of anarchists who think they're Republicans. you know, he had a certain sympathy for them because they got kicked around by Campbell's as much as the workers did. But they didn't really understand that they had a common cause with the workers. And I think this is probably true of a lot of small farmers. I don't know how Dick feels about this, but so often you're a small independent entrepreneur and you're dealing with these huge monopolies that control the market. And that's been a problem with farmers in this country way back to the 19th century, in the populist movement, where they had to deal with the railroads. So I'll leave it at that. But Flock did organize very successfully up in the Pacific Northwest, where I lived for 20 years. There's an organization called Picun, which started out as an immigrant rights organization. They would basically run around through the forest where a lot of immigrant workers were employed doing tree harvesting, and try to keep them from being deported, letting them know what their rights were, defending them. And they came to the conclusion, like, look, we really need a stable organization. The best way to do that is to stop simply being an immigrant rights organization and become a union as well, and try to go to reach people at the workplace and build up some kind of a permanent ongoing organization. And they've been pretty successful at that.
Would any of you like to add on to that?
I just like to make a comment about the Agricultural Labor Relations Board. I'm happy that it exists, et cetera. However, I think that farm workers trying to find justice by moving into that organization, it becomes very difficult because there's so many complexities. To give you an example, about 2 months ago, a woman farm worker called me. I get calls all the time about what's going on in the fields. And a woman farm worker called me hysterically crying, saying she'd just been sexually assaulted in the fields. And I contacted the ALRB about it, and they told me all these steps she would have to go through. And what she needed was to make a phone call and have somebody come right then to be with her about this and give her options. So that was my concern. And the other things as well, during the heat waves, I got calls about farm workers fainting in the field because the temperature was 100 to 108, and the supervisor would not let them leave. And again, what they needed was somebody to call that could be right there to deal with this. In fact, one woman fell and hit her head and had to be taken to the hospital in an ambulance. And so these kind of abuses, even though the laws are on the books, there's often no oversight, and farm workers are left with very few options about how to defend themselves or what positive actions they can take to restore their own dignity in the process. Let's see, UC Davis and the Southern Poverty Law Center indicate that between 60 and 80% of farm worker women are sexually harassed, groped, or outright raped in the field. Now, why is this allowed? Why isn't there enough oversight to prevent this? I mean, it basically would be a living hell.
I think with any business or almost any relationships, there's the good and the bad. There's some bad apples out there, and I'm not going to deny that. So, I mean, the good thing is, like in our company just a week ago today, we won the award for Ag Safe, which is keeping our employees safe. And a lot of that goes back from the day they come to work for us, and they're trained how to complain, and they're trained to, this is the process you go through. And if you don't get ill, and then my phone number's on there, my personal phone number, that they can dial me direct on my cell phone 24 hours a day if there's ever a problem. And I think that it goes to hold the people accountable. If we get one complaint about a supervisor, we're going to follow up on that. We're not going to just sweep it under the carpet and hope something straightens out. So, I mean, we've been like, and just worker safety, just you're talking about the heat, make sure that we have easy ups out there in the, for shade for the people in the field when the temperature goes over a certain degree. Make sure they've got cold water, not just water, but cold water out in the field. You know, we buy tons of ice down, literally tons of ice down in the Imperial Valley because it gets really hot down there. And we have that on site all the time. So when we take water, we take ice and put it in the water to take so they have cold water in the field all times. And, you know, it requires you to go that extra mile, but there again, it's an investment in your employees that are the oars in the water, you know? And so I think that, it's like I say, there is some bad apples and we're going to keep working on trying to weed them out, you know, but we take a lot of pride. I mean, like, you know, I don't know how many of you know about like experience mods and workers' comp, but our experience mods, some of the companies were up to 130, 140, 140. Our experience mod's been below 100% for 10 years now that because of our worker safety programs and following through and helping people get back to work if they do get an injury, not ignoring them. We work with them and try to get them back in the workforce, and it may take us some time and some extra money to get them there, but you know, we take a lot of pride in getting them back online and not just, you know, throwing them to the wind. So I think that and that award we got last week just shows kind of, you know, what we do and how it should work. So.
Thank you three so much. At this point, we would like to ask you all to share any questions that you may have. There was a note card and a small pencil on your seat. So if you have a question, please write it down there. And then I think Denise will be collecting and sharing them up here. But before we start listening to or getting those questions, we have Carolyn Rudolph who would like to make a few comments before we start with the Q&A from you all.
I have nothing to say, but that's not true. I do. So the reason I'm plugging in because I own a restaurant that gets the benefit of Peixoto and farm workers, and without them, I wouldn't have this dream, which is to nourish community. And to offer nourishment is a spiritual act of generosity. And I wanted to say something, because you guys all chose to be here, and we have an opportunity to do something through our action. One of the things is I encourage you to buy organic, because no farm worker, who I consider a farmer, to me a farm worker is a farmer, should ever have to deal with poison, cancer-causing poison in the field that their kids and their families are exposed to. And one of the ways we can do that is purchasing organic. And anyone who chooses to be an organic farmer, and can you not hear me? I'm a loud mouth. Okay. Sorry, did you hear me? Okay. I wasn't a Yale leader for nothing. One of the things that to choose to be an organic farmer, it's a noble act. It's truly a noble act. And I really don't understand. I mean, if you've ever looked at the farm bill, you'd go, what? There's not even any food in the farm bill. It's all about animal feed and junk food, and we can make a difference by writing and being and I'm sure all of you guys are active because you wouldn't be here if you weren't. But to be a farmer deserves its own special category. They're nourishing people. They're nourishing citizens. What is more important than to nourish the population of the United States? And the people, the farm workers, these are holy people that are providing us, and they exist. They exist. And we're so spoiled. We go to the store and the shelves are filled with food. It came from somewhere. I was going to read something, but I got carried away here. And the thing about Lakeside Organics is their motto is, I grow the soil, we grow the soil, and the soil grows the plant. And I don't know if you know this because so many people don't. The soil is the most important ingredient in the nutrition of food. And soil is my first love. And my husband's okay with that. He accepts it. Because and anyone who's read anything about the Dust Bowl or what's happened with the way we farmed and we're dependent on food. So our restaurant, it's like my spiritual practice to feed people. I'm obsessed with feeding people. And it's really my spiritual practice. And because of Dick's loyalty to Charlie Hong Kong, because we're just little potatoes to him, because Dick made the decision, a big decision to go big. And he now is feeding people across the United States. He's providing outstanding nourishment. My restaurant is called Charlie Hong Kong, and we go through literally 400 pounds of organic produce every morning gets chopped, and 1 ton of chard a month. Because I am obsessed with people eating their greens and getting their veggies, because that's your nutrition and it's nutrient dense. So because of this, every year, Dick has been so kind, because it's really a lot of work on his part, for Charlie Hong Kong to bring food into the fields, because we want the farm workers who are working in the fields to see what we do with their hard work. So we bring in Dick's, they set up a table, and we bring in noodle and rice bowls, and I see the same beautiful faces year after year after year. They know me, I know them, because Dick employs them. I stand with them in the fields of chard that they harvest with huge gratitude to them. And it's just such an honor. So I'm going to end with this. The next time you eat, just take that moment to look at your plate. Take a breath and think about all the people. They're not there, but they exist, and why that food is on your plate. And the whole universe exists in that food. The sun, the rain, the soil, the hands of so many magnificent people. Stardust is in that food. And take that moment of gratitude and think about that thread woven through all of us that keeps us connected. Thank you for letting me say something. Thank you for your guys so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Want to make a quick comment about Caroline's comments. You know, one of the funny things is there's a guy named Bonifacio who's worked for me over 20 years, and he's very versatile. He can go from different crews and different things. So, and we try to change it up each year and put when Charlie Hong Kong comes out to do the cooking, we move him to different crews. But she's seen Bonifacio's face there all the time. And it's funny because the last 3 years he's happened to be on that crew that she came out and did that. So he told me after the last time we finished it, he what's up, Bonnie? And he says, hey, next year, make sure you put me on the right crew so I can be there for eating the Caroline's foods. Okay. But, you know, the other thing too, is I just want to comment, you know, we transition a lot of our land around schools, housing developments. We target purposely, you know, along Ohlone School, and which was a lot of pesticide issues there, around Amesti School, you know, a lot of issues there, and against the city of Watsonville. Seascape out here in Seascape, we farm right on the end of Dolphin Drive. They're right there in that area there. And we purposely transition those so that we can be the buffer between conventional and organic so that we can eliminate the pesticide problems with the schools and things like that. So we made a lot of effort to do that. And it's actually worked out really well for us because it eliminates a lot of the pesticide issues that the schools were having. And the other thing too is like she was talking about the health. I mean, you know, part of our workers' comp rate coming down is we don't have pesticide issues with the employees themselves. They don't go home with pesticides on their clothes. They don't take that home to their family. And we have a lot of pride in that. I mean, you know, our company's grown over the years, and today we're the largest family-owned, solely organic vegetable shipper in the United States. And that's been quite a process to get to that point. But every day our produce goes to almost every state in the United States to serve people all over the country. And I got a note on my desk today: your baby broccoli made my Valentine's, the Valentine's it was supposed to be, because your baby broccoli was almost as sweet as my date. So, okay.
Well, first of all, the subject of bosses, I mean, in my working life, I've had good bosses and bad bosses and horrible bosses. And frankly, if all of them had been good, life would be very different in this country. And, you know, I appreciate what you said about, you know, trying to do the right thing. Unfortunately, I think even the best bosses have to respond to market pressures, and they have to make compromises to stay in business, and they have to do things they might not like doing. And then sometimes they start rationalizing and justifying, and then in no time at all, you know, we're off and running. And I think that's why toxic pesticides have become, the use of them has become so widespread in this country. It was an economic calculation to bring them in. And farm workers have really been like the canaries in the coal mine. They were the first to feel the effects of what's finding its way into all of our bodies, you know. That's one reason why we should pay a lot more attention to what happens to them, because it's going to catch up with us too. The other point I think I would want to make is that, you know, organic produce costs more, and fresh produce frequently is not even any kind of fresh produce frequently isn't even available in the lower income neighborhoods in our cities. You know, you go to Detroit, for instance, you know, the inner city Detroit, it's like there are just no supermarkets around. People go to fast food places, or they go to convenience stores to get their meals, and that's all that's available to them. So, I mean, food insecurity is a big deal, and it goes way beyond organic and non-organic.
Yeah, thank you. The first question we have from the audience is, what is the average hourly wage for local farm workers? Would anyone like to?
Most of our, so a lot of the wages are based off, a minimum wage has been bumped up. So over the period of years, so now it's $15.50 per hour. So there is some of our employees that only make $15.50 an hour, but we have incentives for all of our employees to, like when they're doing they do piece rate on all the harvesting we do. And so that means they get paid so much per box to harvest for each one. So most of our guys, and I looked at this because I knew this question would come up. So most of our guys are making right around $19 to $20 per hour on a piece rate basis. And I think that's about probably the average. A lot of the berry guys, same thing. They have an hourly, so much an hour plus a piece rate. And I think that's kind of a range that most of them make into that $19 to $20 per hour, somewhere in that range. Sometimes it can get up in the mid 20s. I mean, like we had one of our baby broccoli crews the other day is making $29 an hour. And so it can range, but that's kind of the average for the whole year. And very seldom do they make the minimum wage. And then if we're paying like for hoeing and thinning that they don't have a piece rate, then they get up between $16.50 to $17 an hour for that. Tractor drivers make about $19. Irrigators are about $17.50. So that's kind of the range that they make right now.
Yes, thank you. And I do want to acknowledge that it is 7:30, which I think is a time, and I'm trying to find Denise, but I think is a time that our event would be wrapping up. But If it's okay with you all, we could take a couple more questions. Okay, so is there any way to publicize the growers who steal from workers' wages? I think they're referring to what you were talking about.
Well, a couple of the times that this has happened to farm workers, what the grower has done is declared bankruptcy and closed down their enterprise and then just kind of faded away. So they have ways of getting around being public about it. And one of them is just to shut down their company and declare bankruptcy for it and just take the money and buy their big house and car and just do it that way. So, yeah.
I think that, you know, it's kind of a tough area to point the finger at somebody like that. But I think the interesting thing is everybody kind of assumes that these farm workers aren't educated, you know, and I always preach that. I said, you know, when they say unskilled labor, and I always take the white people out there and show them that out in the field says, here's Edgar that's been working for me bunching radishes for 20 years, bought his house from, you know, from bunching radishes, doesn't want to be a foreman, doesn't want to be makes good money bunching radishes, takes a lot of pride in what he does. But the thing is he when he's bunching radishes, though, he makes good money and he's happy. But the thing is the word gets around. He's got the same phone I do in his pocket. And if his friend down the road is getting cheated, his friend calls him and say, Edgar, you got a job for me over there? Or vice versa. Edgar call, hey, you know what? You should come over here and work over here. That happens all the time in the strawberry industry, almost to the point where, and the strawberry guys kind of joke about this, where there's this whole internet between the Oaxacans, which are the main workforce around our area, that they basically have this whole group that they send message back together. Oh, the guy down the road, he's got the best berries right now. Go work for him this week. And all of a sudden he's got all the workers he needs, you know? And 2 weeks later, they're back at the other guys because his berries are better. So that never happened before, but now with the phones they have, they're all getting in touch. So if somebody's really cheating somebody out there, the word gets around, don't go there. And it's kind of sad, but a lot of times they get the first guys come from Mexico, end up going there, getting cheated, learning a lesson, you know, and hopefully go to work for somebody more reputable.
Wage theft is very widespread in this country, not just in the fields. And actually, you want to know how you expose somebody? Well, one prominent person who practiced wage theft is named Donald Trump. That came up, you know, early in the 2016 campaign, but nobody paid a whole lot of attention to it. People should have. I don't think any working person who's aware that he did that to people he hired should be voting for him. I don't care how much you like his hairdo.
This question says, what are your thoughts about the continued move towards mechanization? How do you see technology impacting both farm workers and union focus for upcoming generations?
I think that's one of the things we're working really hard on right now, that technology is moving so fast. Like I always tell the story that when I started farming, I had a 23 horsepower Caterpillar tractor that started with a rope. That's what I started farming. Now my son drives he's out there right now tonight driving a 560 horsepower John Deere that's GPS guided, steers itself, runs the engine automatic on cruise control. And he called me the other night and he says, Dad, I need another tractor. This one's broke down. I said, what's the matter, Rick? And he says, my iPod won't hook onto the damn thing. And he says, I can't get my music. But technology is moving really fast in a lot of ways. I mean, like 2 weeks ago, I was in the desert watching a spot sprayer that would spray the weeds, take a picture, spray the weeds, kill the weeds. There's thinning right now that can basically will take a picture of the next 12, 15 plants and decide which ones are the good ones, which are the bad ones, and can weed those out. And the most impressive thing I've seen lately is a laser weeder that basically would watch where we have spinach where it's planted really thick. So they're basically planted a quarter of an inch apart. And this laser weeder would go and zap the weeds right out from between those plants as fast as you can walk down the row. Now, right now, it costs $1 million for that machine. I'm not buying one today, just so you know. But the technology is moving and the price of it's coming down, and it won't be long. You'll see that. And I preach that to the farm workers. A lot of my farm workers did not go to college. A lot of their kids are going to college, and a lot of them, I teach that farm worker in the future is not going to be the guy swinging the hoe. It's going to be the guy that's going to manage a laser weeder that's going to take care of the weeds for us. And so technology is moving so fast right now, almost the point, like one of the most things I'm excited about is they're developing a sprayer right now that as you drive through will, because we do organic sprays with soaps and oils and things, but it can actually drive, as it goes through the field, it can actually look with infrared through the plant, and it can detect what kind of pest is on that plant, decide whether it's a beneficial that they want to leave, or if it's an aphid or worm that they want to knock out. Spray only that leaf as it goes by and leave the predator alone. Technologies, the guys I've talked to said, we're within the next year or two, we're going to have it, so technology is going to help us be better farmers. It's going to help us cut down our sprays. It's going to help people to transition more ground to organic because we'll have the tools to fight the battle. So technologies is we've had a couple of guys in our company, that's all they work on every day is to develop the next technology to make it all happen.
Thank you. This next question says, I would love to hear more about the moderator's experience growing up in a farm worker's family. How have her father's experiences improved or not over time? How did this affect the family? Thank you for that question. And so, so I was thinking about this right now, and my dad has worked at this farm with this farmer, or at that specific farm since I was born. So it's been a few decades now, and he has experienced a lot of changes over the years. So when I was growing up, it was the father that was running the farm and all of that good stuff. And he was so amazing. He was amazing to my family. He bought our first desktop computer. He purchased it for us. And when I was going away to college, I shared with you all, or Denise shared during my introduction, that I'm the first in my family to graduate from high school. And my dad's boss at that time, he gave me money to buy, or my dad money to buy me like everything for my dorm, right? So he was amazing. He did a lot for me and my family, and he was great. And then one of his sons took over, and then things changed a lot. And so in terms of treatment towards my dad, in terms of the respect that my dad felt like he was getting, which he had a lot of respect from the father, but not necessarily from the son. And his hours have been cut significantly. And my dad also says he feels some type of way because he's treated differently now because he's aging, his body's older, and he's not able to do the things that he was able to do before, right? So although they have seen like an increase in pay, their hours have been cut significantly to where there's loss now, right? So there's been a lot of changes, and hearing you talk, Dick, I'm like, I wish my dad worked at your farm, but yeah, that's a little bit of the changes that I've seen. So it's been mostly, at least in my dad's experience, from the shift in management and the ideals that were brought into the farm, and the political views also of the son being, constantly shared, and then making the workers, including my dad, and it's a lot of my family members that work in that farm, making them feel not wanted, or making them feel, like discriminated against, and not being able to say anything because that's your boss, right? And you can get fired. So and I think it's something that we see often, that then the farm workers come home and they're angry, they're upset, and they take it out on their families, right? Because they can't necessarily speak up to their boss because they can get fired. So, yeah. Would anyone like to?
Listening to you talk about that, I just find myself thinking it's kind of a hell of a note when your working conditions depend on what kind of a person you work for, or whether or not he passed his values on to his kids or not. That's something you have no control over, I think really when you talk about, employer-employee relationships, it's a power relationship. And there's some people who exercise it responsibly and some people who don't, but it's still a power relationship. And I think that's really what unions are supposed to try to counteract, so the workers can meet the employer, be he a good person or a bad person, on something resembling equal terms. Same thing with, the ALRA. A good union, if it's doing its job, will help workers navigate some of those technical, legal processes you have to go through to get the legal protection you're entitled to. A good union will do that. My union did it. And made sure people got their workers' comp, and frequently had to just jump through. We had people who were specialists in that area who could help you if you were getting messed over. The average letter carrier simply did not have the ability to handle that on his own.
I think one of the things we didn't talk about, and we talked a little bit earlier about this program called H2A. And I think one of the things that your dad's experience with the hours being cut is because state of California has been changing the laws over the years. So used to be an irrigator could work endless hours. They loved it. They loved to come here, work long hours. They work 15, 16 hours a day. It was not overtime. And then over the period of years, they've started implementing overtime. It was first 12 hours, then it's 10 hours. Now it's 8 hours. So you hit overtime at 40 hours, but our farms don't work on 40 hours. They work on 60, 70, 80 hours. The problem is, so now we need more employees so that we can't really afford to pay time and a half. And so we need more employees, but there's no more employees out there. So one of the things we've done as a company a little different is we're not a fan of H2A. H2A is a government program that says, bring people across the border. You have to guarantee them work. You have to pay them this wage. You have to pay for their housing. You have to pay for their transportation. You have to pay for their meals. And that's the government. Like I say, get government involved in anything, they'll screw it up for sure. So they basically say, this is what happens. Well, when you look at that costs that employees probably 25 to 30% more than you're paying your own employees. So we call it the Lakeside H2A program. So what we do is allow our workers to work overtime. We don't hire H2A program for that reason. And we allow them to work 2, 3, or 4 hours overtime every day. So they do make more money when they get that overtime pay, and they appreciate the extra hours. But it goes in their pockets, because I'll be damned if I'm going to have somebody come from Mexico that's going to come first time ever work for me and make more than the guy that's worked for me for 25 years. Makes no sense. And so that way they can make more money, keeps them happy. We have better retention, and it works good. I wish the government would take a step back and get some kind of guest worker program that would work for everybody, and it would work if they just allow it to work. But they've created this monster, the H2A, and now they got H2A1 or whatever, and it just keeps getting worse.
No, it's fine.
And the last question we'll have for tonight is, can you speak to how the farm workers deal with the high cost of housing in our area?
Well, you all heard about what happened at Half Moon Bay and the kind of living conditions. And actually, people act very surprised, but that's nothing new. I mean, that's what farm workers do, because rents are way over what they can afford. And what I've seen is over the years is that you end up having 2 or 3 families in a 1-bedroom place, and people sleeping on the floor in the kitchen, and people just crammed together. And that's one reason why COVID spread so rapidly. So almost any unit in at least the Watsonville city area is going to have, if it's designed for 1 family, it's going to have at least 2 or 2 to 4 families. And then there's people that create shacks down on the Pajaro River. And about 10 years ago, we had a man drown because the river rose during a storm and he drowned. And then another thing that's done is people rent their garages, and those are the ones that really flooded during these storms recently. And unfortunately, the garages typically don't have heat. And about 5 years ago, 2 men rented a garage and they were freezing cold in the winter. So they set up a barbecue to warm it up, and they died of carbon monoxide poisoning. And usually these kind of stories never make the obituaries. You won't hear about them. They just, farm workers tend to just be kind of thrown under the rug and disappear rather than dealing with this as a crisis and a problem. And we need decent, affordable housing for farm workers. And the the only housing like that I've found is at the Buena Vista migrant camp. But the problem with the migrant camp is that people have to leave at the end of November, get rid of their belongings, and they can't come back until April 1st of the following year. So every year they're moving. And I know families that I've known families for 25 years that have done that whole cycle 25 times that I've known them. And we're working on getting half the units for year-round residents at this point. And hopefully we can manage that. But there isn't really a solution that I think is appropriate for farm workers.
I think one of the things is that you expressed a lot of the problems, and so the solution is from the guys that I've talked to is they've got to create a simpler living situation. And every time I had Greg Caput riding with me a few years ago, and he said, well, I said, what about low income housing? Well, the problem is if you're going to qualify for low income housing in Santa Cruz County, you got to make at least $180,000 a year. And I go, well, what do you mean? No, you mean less? No, he says, in order to qualify for the financing to buy a house, you have to make 180,000. Problem is, if you make that much money, you don't qualify for the housing. So that's kind of, that's typical government for you, you know? And so, but the problem is like most of the workers that I've talked to, they would like to have a really simple living situation. Keep it simple. I mean, there's like these, I've seen up in San Jose, they're doing these like mini homes and things like that. I mean, if you go on the internet and you'll look, just go Google small housing units, you'll see these houses for $10,000, $15,000 that, you know, have a kitchenette in there, simple living quarters. And remember, they're out working in the field all day long. They don't spend a lot of time at home, and they just want a place they can go home, cook dinner, go to sleep, and go back to work the next day. That's really what they want to. And I was looking years ago at 3 or 4 years ago, trying to look at maybe setting something out, and the permits to get it would be more than these homes would cost. And in Santa Cruz County, they require you to put fire sprinklers in, even if it's a small house where the guy's literally 5 4, to get out. And so, well, why can't they just step outside? So it doesn't meet code, And so the fire sprinklers would cost more than the house. So those are the things, those are the deals. Like I would love to have units, put 20, 30 units on, one of our ranches. And we've looked at it several times. Every time we get it, the code, the zoning, the fire sprinklers, all these things are roadblocks that we just give up. I can't do it. But there's a lot of growers that would like to put, something out on their ranch. And then the guys wouldn't even have to go into town. They could just live on the ranch and go to work on the ranch, and they'd be perfectly happy there, But like I tell everybody, just try to keep it simple.
We're about out of time, aren't we? Yeah. Well, I want to make one last point, I think, and it's not directly related to the issue of housing, except to say that housing is a problem everywhere. It's certainly a problem in Oakland. Every day when I walk my granddaughter to school, I see people my age, basically on the street, they've been all night, who basically, a lot of people have lost their homes in West Oakland because the real estate speculators have moved in and jacked the prices up so high that people have lived there for years and years can't afford to stay there, and they've got nowhere else to go. I think there's a tremendous amount of, the 1%. They have more money at their disposal, I think, than any previous generation of wealthy in this country. And that money has to go somewhere, and it doesn't go into manufacturing much anymore, not domestic manufacturing at least. It gets invested in like speculative enterprises, it goes into the housing market because that's an wonderfully easy way to make a buck without actually doing anything or producing anything. A lot of it gets a tremendous amount of money has gone down to Mexico. I mean, to invest in frozen food plants down there that used to operate very well up here, because ever since the devaluation of the peso back in the 80s, it's been much, much cheaper to produce in Mexico. A dollar goes a long way down there. So you can just put money in a Mexican plant or dump your surplus corn on a Mexican market and throw a lot of Mexican peasants off their land in the process and force them to come north. And you can come out, making out like a bandit. I think we have to realize that when we talk about immigration, especially, it's not just a matter of workers coming north, it's a matter of capital going south. And those two processes have been joined for over 100 years, I think. It's also worth reminding ourselves that California used to be part of Mexico. Arizona used to be part of Mexico. New Mexico, Texas used to be part of Mexico. And I bet if it still were, you wouldn't have the kind of stuff that's going on now in Texas.
I just wanted to make one last comment, and that is I deal with farm worker families directly. And I am, quite frankly, sick and tired of meeting so many of their children with cancer, ADHD, autism spectrum, learning disabilities, birth defects. One boy, his ear didn't develop. And I think this is largely caused by exposure to pesticides. And we have horrible carcinogenic pesticides. In fact, 1,3-D can drift up to 7.5 miles. That's all of Watsonville. And I do understand about market forces and the needs of the economy and all of that. But what about these children? And where is the humanity in this? We must do something about this. And this is one statistic that I thought was interesting. It says in the zip codes that encompass Santa Cruz County, the 95076 zip code stands out as one of the few in the county that has a majority Latinx population at 70.7%. A full 60% of all Latinx residents in all of Santa Cruz County zip codes live within the 95076 zip code, which includes Watsonville, while only 12.6% of the county's white population lives there. However, 98.5% of the pesticides associated with childhood leukemia and 95.2% of pesticides tied to childhood brain cancer were applied in 2019 in the 95076 zip code alone. And, we need to do something about this. This is called environmental racism. And we really need to do this. And I think the solution is we need to all push for organic regenerative agriculture. We don't need these pesticides. There's been many studies, including from the UN, the Rodale Institute. If we converted to all organic tomorrow, we could feed all of humanity. So why aren't we doing that? And look at the cost to these children whose lives basically are being stolen. So we started a group in Watsonville called CORA, Campaign for Organic Regenerative Agriculture. And we're working to convert the entire county to organic regenerative agriculture and save these children's futures. Thank you.
Just to expand on that a little bit, I mean, one of the things we take a lot of pride is the elimination of the pesticides and the chemicals that we have not put in the Paro Valley. So we did some calculations. We figured we have, by our farming in the last 25 years, we have not put 100,000 tons of chemicals in the Paro Valley in the last 25 years. So we work a lot with Jacob's Heart, which is kids cancer deal. We've been in touch with them. We've supported them financially and over the years, and I'm a firm believer in that we definitely need to help solve the problem. And I think that a lot of farmers are starting to learn that there's better ways of farming. And when we first got into organic, every conventional farmer over there looked over the fence at me and thought, he's gone crazy, man. He's gone crazy. That's for hippies, you know? But then when we showed them it could be done, now a lot of them have started their own organic ranches and they're starting to make the conversion. And it's really interesting when you learn how to do it, because like I say, there's no real magic to it. What we've done is just gone back to what Mother Nature had figured out before we ever showed up. And we create habitat around the field that will duplicate what Mother Nature had before, and not killing all the beneficials off, and they take care of the problems for us. So we spray very little, even organic sprays, we spray very little because we create that habitat. And if the more people that farm organically, the more habitats created and the better it becomes for everybody.
What a great way to end the night, right? On a positive note. So thank you so much again, Anne, Dick, and Peter, for being amazing panelists. And thank you all as an audience for being here, for your questions. We hope you enjoyed it, and hope to see you also in the future events that will be hosted. And I hope you have a good night. Thank you.
I wanted to say one thing. Anne, you've got some copies of your book up front, right? At the table? No? Okay. Just one, yeah. Denise asked me to bring some of these. I didn't, but it's a piece of your local history. It's a great story. I don't know if I did it justice or not, but if you go to the Haymarket Books webpage, you can order it for about $12 or something like that. Not a whole lot. So, Song of the Stubborn 1000.